there, my name's Alex and today I'm going to show you how to make this super cute flower bucket hat just like the guys from Half-Alive wear. Things you'll need for this project are yarn in 3 different colours of your choice. I'm using Knit Picks Dishy Cotton yarn and a crochet hook. I'm using a 4.5mm to get the correct size, a pair of scissors, a darning needle and a tape measure. Now your hat will feature 5 of these flower motifs around the side and 1 at the very top of the hat. Each flower is made up of a centre and 2 rows of petals and then a finish with a border. Now the top of the hat is done a little bit differently with the finishing. We'll put a seam around that top edge for a fold and for the brim as well. Now, I don't want to bore you, but before we start the project, I just want to talk about a few things first. I'm using Knit Picks Dishy worsted weight cotton, and I'll put the colours up on the screen for you for Josh Taylor's hat. And I'm using a 4.5mm or a G or a 7 size hook to achieve the right tension that I need for this project. So here are the colours for Jay Tyler's and Brett's hats, using the same size hook. And I'll also put up a list of alternative yarns that you can use that will give you exactly the same effect and should work out fine with a 4.5mm hook. Now you don't need to stick to the colours that I have used, they're just to match the Half-Alive colours. Here are some swatches of other colour combinations that I put together. You can also use acrylic yarn. You may have some yarn that already have lying around, so it's great for using for scraps. You just want to check that the hook size that you need will give you the right sizing for your hat. So your flower motif needs to be 82mm across or 3¼ inches across. So let's get into it. Okay, using the colour that you're going to use for the centre of your flower, you want to create a slip knot. Put that onto your hook and chain 5 stitches. Then join to the very first chain that you created using a slip stitch. Now we're going to use this as our magic ring alternative, and it's just going to keep our centre of our circle the same size with that little opening. So we're going to work into that hole, and we're also going to tuck in our yarn tail because we're going to try and reduce as much of the sewing in of yarn tails when we've finished our project as we can. We don't want to do that. So you chain 2, and that's going to create that very first stitch. Yarn over, hook into that centre ring, yarn over, pull it through, and yarn over again. We're going to pull it through the all 3 of those stitches on our hook. There we go. So that's our second stitch. Then we're going to chain 1, yarn over into the hole, pick up the yarn, yarn over again all through all 3 stitches, and then chain 1. So that's a half double crochet that we're creating there, followed by a chain stitch. We're going to repeat that so that we have 10 stitches all the way around our circle. Enjoying this tutorial so far? Please hit that like button and consider subscribing. I'd really appreciate it, but you also won't miss out on any more of my fun creative craft content, and I don't want you to miss out. Okay, so make sure that you have your 12 stitches ending in a chain stitch, and now we're going to slip stitch to the very top of the very first stitch that we created. Trim your yarn and then just create another stitch and pull through that yarn like so. If you've managed to work around your yarn tail, you can trim that off. Using the colour yarn for your flower petals, you want to create a slip knot, put that onto your crochet hook, and we're going to join onto our flower centre somewhere opposite to the other side of where our flower center yarn tail is. And that's just so we can tuck those tails in evenly. You're going to create 2 chain stitches, and now we're going to work 1 double crochet into the very same space that we joined onto our flower center. Yarn over. Now we're going to pull the yarn over and pull that through 2 loops on our hook, yarn over and through the remaining 2 loops on our hook, and that is a double crochet. So you want to make sure also that we're working over our yarn tail so we don't have to stitch that in later. Chain 1, and now we're going to move over to the next stitch space. So yarn over, hook through, yarn over, bring it through, yarn over through the first 2 loops on your hook, yarn over through the second 2 loops on your hook. We're going to create another one in that same space, through 2, through 2, and then chain for a space. Over to the next gap, yarn over, into that stitch space there, 2 and 2, and 1 more. So we're doing groups of 2 double crochets around the center of our flower, separated by 1 chain. So you'll end up with 12 groups of 2 and a chain around your center. Now when you create your very last chain stitch, you want to join to the top of that first stitch that you created. So just doing a slip stitch to the very top of the first stitch created in that round, and then we're going to slip stitch across to the left to that stitch space. So see there's a big gap there, that's where we're going to join our next petal into that space. So you want to move across by creating a slip stitch. That's just moved your working yarn over to the gap. So our first stitch will be to chain 2. And in that very same space, we're going to create a 4 double crochet cluster. So what we're doing is we're pulling the yarn through the first 2 loops on the hook, but we're keeping the last 2 loops on the hook. So yarn over, back through. So I've done 1 so far. This is our second one. Yarn over through those 2 loops. So now we've got 3 stitches and 3 loops on our hook. Yarn over, back through the stitch space, pick up the yarn, bring it through, and we're going to pull it through just those 2 loops. So now we've got 4 loops on our hook. 1 more, yarn over, back through that stitch space, pick up the yarn, pull it through, yarn over, through the very first 2 stitches only. Now you can see we've got 4 stitches including our very first 2 chains we created, all on our hook. Yarn over and pull the yarn all the way through the tops of those loops, through those loops. So what you'll see is it creates kind of a petal that it groups it all together. You chain 3 stitches and we're going to move over to the next stitch space. So now we're going to create a 5 double crochet cluster, because the first one we had our chains to act as our very first stitch. Yarn through just 2 stitches only, yarn over, back through that space, yarn over through just 2 stitches, repeat that through 2. So we now have 4 loops on our hook. Yarn over through the space, yarn over, bring it up, yarn over through 2. And 1 more time. through 2, and we should now have 6 loops on our hook. Beautiful. So yarn over and then pulling it through all of those 6 loops. 3 chains, and then we're going to repeat that. So this is a 5 double crochet cluster, and it creates a nice full petal for our flower. So if you lose count, you're just doing that until you end up with 6 loops on your hook. Yarn over through all 6 of those loops, chain 3 and repeat. Now you want to repeat that all the way around your flower, and when you've finished, and I'll show you how to join that at the end, you want to create 6 of these flowers. So 5 for the sides of your hat and 1 for the very top. The last 3 chain stitches, and now we're going to join to this. It'll be quite a large or a long looking loop at the very top of our very first cluster we created. Now we're going to slip stitch it to that top section. Trim your yarn, chain, pulling it all the way through. Okay, that's our very first flower. So another 5 to go. Now I'm just checking here, and this is great if you are not using the yarn that I've recommended and the hook size. You want to check if you're making a medium size adult hat, it's got to be 3 1/4 inches across your flower motif, or around about 82 millimeters. Now if you wanted to make a size smaller, then I would use a 4 millimeter hook instead of a 4.5. Different yarn is going to give you a different result, so always best to swatch it and check it. If you create one flower motif, you'll be able to work out whether your hat is going to be the right size or whether you need to adjust by changing your hook. Now as you can see with the hat, the sides are treated a little bit differently around the edge than the motif on the top of the hat. So you want to pop one of those, you want to make your 6 flowers and put one aside, and that's going to be for the top of the hat. And we're going to work on doing the border now on the flower. Now you can see it's not in a square, it actually has an angled side so that your hat ends up having a flared out side like a hat should. Just let you know this is going to be the trickiest round of any of the making of the hat, but I'll try and explain it as simply as I can. And we're going to work so that you can stitch along each of those edges with the remaining yarn tail, because I'm a big stickler for, hey, let's not sew. I like to crochet, let's not sew. So we'll try and reduce the sewing as much as possible. So this is how we're going to do it. You grab your flower motif. You want to pick somewhere around the other side, roughly around the other side from the yarn tail again. We're going to work over our yarn tail so we don't have to stitch. We're going to slip stitch it onto that big gap between the petals. And chain 2 stitches. That's going to create our very first stitch. I'm just going to show you here, this is where it comes out from the edge of the flower. So we're working on the top left hand corner of our side shape. Yarn over into the same space, same gap, and we're going to create a half double crochet, so all the way through all 3 loops on our hook. Another half double crochet, and one more. So that gives us 4 stitches into the side or the bottom part of the corner. It'll all become a bit clearer later on. And we're also going to work over our yarn tail, so makes it easier for us. Yarn over into the next gap, we're creating another half double crochet. And followed by 3 single crochets. So let's hook into that gap, picking up the yarn, yarn over, pulling it through those 2 loops and you hook. Really simple. One more. And a half double crochet. Okay, so you can start to see how well that combination of stitches flattens out a circle and starts to give it a nice straight edge. So I'm about to work on this corner. So working into the next big open stitch space. Yarn over, we're going to be creating a double crochet stitch, tucking in our tail, through 2, yarn over through 2, another double crochet. This is the 3rd double crochet. And now we need to create a longer stitch to get into the corner. So we're going to create a treble, which is wrapping your yarn twice around your hook, through the gap, picking up the yarn, and we're going to go through just 2 of the loops on our hook. Yarn over through 2, yarn over through 2, yarn over through 2. And that gives us a really nice long stitch that goes into the corner. Now we're going to chain 1, which will give us our little point to the corner. We're going to reverse what we just did there by creating another treble, so twice around the hook. We'll through 2 loops, 2 loops, and 2 loops. A double crochet, through 2, through 2, another double crochet, another double crochet, and another double crochet. So that's going to give us a nice corner, and it's also going to help us flare it, that length out a little bit, because we put 5 stitches along that bottom and only 4 in the side. So we're going to start to make it a little bit wider across that base. Your half double crochet into the next gap, followed by 3 singles, and another half double. Moving across to the next gap, we're going to repeat that, tucking in our tails, so a half double crochet, followed by 3 single crochet stitches, followed by another half double crochet. So you can see how that's flattening out the bottom part of that polygon. So now moving across to the next big space, which is going to be our next corner. A double crochet, another double. So we've got 4 double crochet stitches here. That's 2, 3, and 4, and then followed by a treble. So twice around the hook, into the gap, yarn over through 2, through 2, and through 2, chain 1 for our corner, another treble crochet, and 3 double crochet stitches. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so it's time to move it over to our next space and start working up on the right hand side. I can just trim my tail off because I've been able to tuck it into my work as I go. So I've got a half double crochet, 3 single crochets, and a half double crochet to the next gap, which is our corner. A half double crochet, half double, and now a double crochet. And now we're equal to the other side. Chain 1 for our corner, so a double crochet, a double crochet, double crochet, and now we're going to move over to our next space, which is a half double, 2 singles, a half double, over to our next space, which is a half double, 2 singles, a half double, over to our next space, which is where our corner is, where we started. It's a double crochet, a double, and a double, chain 1, and then join to the top of the very first stitch we created. So now that we've completed that round, what I like to do is trim off the yarn and leave about 3 feet or 90 centimeters of yarn left on that tail, just so I can join it to the next square when I finish the next square. So that tail is going to help me, rather than having to join another piece to join on the next square. I'm going to be able to use that to stitch it together, or in this case crochet it together. So what we're going to do, we're going to just insert the hook into the corresponding stitch on the next square after we've completed our 5 flower motifs for the hat sides. So I'm just slipping the hook through the very top stitch of both of those sides, wrapping the yarn around and bringing it through, so slip stitching it together. I'll see if I can make that a little bit clearer for you. So I'm going to put the hook under that very top stitch on the side, this very top bit, and the corresponding stitch on the other side. So inserting the hook to both of those top stitches, wrapping the yarn over the hook, and then pulling it through all the loops. Now you don't want to do this too tightly because you want to have some stretch in it, and if you keep the stitches too tightly while you're doing this, it will kind of gather your squares or your flower motifs together, and you don't want to do that. You want to have it to sit nice and flat. So you just go along very carefully, make sure that you're getting the corresponding stitch from both sides and slip stitching that along. Now if this is something that sort of is scaring you to do that join, you can thread a needle and sew it up, and it works just as well. All the way along those edges. And what you want to do is join all 5 of your hat sides together using this method, or stitching it. when you get to the end of each side, you can just trim that excess tail off. So we're keeping all the short sides together. So I'll just speed through this. This is joining all 5 of those squares together. Remember, we have kept our one flower motif aside for the top of the hat. Okay, with the main part of the side of the hat done, it's time to move on to the top of the hat. So we've got our flower motif, and we're just going to be adding to that until we get to the right size for that circle part of the top of the hat. So using our main colour, we're just going to join onto roughly the opposite side to our yarn tail on one of our very last flower motif. Slip stitch that on. And chain 2. Now the top of the hat is created using half double crochet. So once you've got the hang of that, that's all you really need to know about this. There will be some increases which will be super easy to do, so I'll talk you through those. First 2 chains counts as our very first stitch. Then we're going to create another 4 half double crochets into that gap. So that's 3 and 4. So that gives us a total of 5 stitches into that gap. We're tucking in our tail and working over that so we don't have to sew it in later on. And into our next gap, we create another 5 half double crochets. You're going to repeat this pattern of 5 half double crochets in each of those large gaps all the way around, which will give you 50 stitches at the end of round 1 of our hat top. When you finish that round, just join with a slip stitch to the top of the first 2 chains that you created, chain 2, and we're going to half double crochet into each one of these stitches around, but increase every round by 10 stitches. We've created 2 chain stitches. That'll be our first stitch. It's a half double crochet, a half double crochet, that's 3 stitches, just into the tops of each stitch, 4 half double crochets, and now we're going to put 2 into that next stitch space. So 5 and 6 back into that same space. So we're increasing every 5 stitches to 6. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 half double crochets. Then into that next stitch space we'll put 2 half double crochets. 1 and 2. So repeat that pattern all the way around. So every 5th stitch will be an increase, which will give you 60 stitches at the end of round 2 of our hat top. And when you finish the round, slip stitch to the top of your chain 2, which counts as your first double crochet in that round. Half double crochet in the next stitch, that's 2. Again, 3, 4, 5, and now we've got to that V section that you can see where you increased the last round, and we're going to put 2 half double crochets into that space. So 6 and 7. So that is 5 half double crochets, then a half double crochet increase, taking us to 70 stitches at the end of round 3 of our hat top. At the end of that round, slip stitch to the top of your chain and chain 2. So that's 2 half double crochets. So we're using that first chain as our first half double crochet. 3, 4, 5, 6, and with 7th stitch position, you will see that V from our last increase. So we're going to increase into that spot again, so that takes it up to 8 half double crochet. So you want to crochet 6 half doubles and then a half double increase, and repeat that all the way around, which will give you 80 stitches at the end of this round. Join to the top of your chain stitch when you're finished, and I'm just going to check the size and make sure that I am on track. That was the last of the increasing round for the hat top, and it looks like it's going to fit perfectly. So we're going to make this little sort of crease and change the direction of the crochet just so that it gets a nice little fold into the top part of this hat. And the way we're going to do that is by crocheting just in the very back loops only of this next round. So you can see at the top of your crochet you've got your V-shaped stitch. We're just going to put our hook under the very back loop only, and that will change the direction of your crochet to I guess a 90-degree angle. So chain 2, and we're going to half double crochet right the way around. That's all 80 stitches, but just going into those very back loops. So you can already see there's a little bit of a crease line or a fold line that's occurring. That's what we want it to do. So it gives the hat a nice shape. And finish that round by slip stitching to the very first 2 chains that you created. And we're going to now attach this to the sides that we've put together. So using exactly the same technique that we used for joining those flower motif panels together, we're going to crochet the hat top to the hat sides. Now with the hat top, we know that we have 80 stitches around, and if we break that down into groups of 5, because we've got 5 flower motifs around, means every 16 stitches, one of the flower panels should be stitched or crocheted to the hat top. So what I do in this, just to make sure that I'm right on track with my stitches, because sometimes you have to adjust a little bit as you're going around, depending on whether you're right on track with your stitch count or where there might be a bit more of a gap where your panels are joined together, is I put a stitch marker every 16 stitches around the top hat. So you could just use like a safety pin or a paper clip or even a piece of yarn just to position so that you know that every 16 stitches on the top part of the hat, that is where it's going to fall on the flower motif join for the side. I hope that's making sense, but yeah, so you're basically just slip stitching around in the very top loops as we did when we created the side. So you can see that's the 16 stitches across the top. Now I'm going to count my 16 stitches across for my next panel. Put in my stitch marker so I know that I need to get to that join at that point. So just slip stitching around. If this gets too tricky, once again, you can sew that in place. It doesn't have to be crocheted. I like the crochet look because it gives a nice little raised edge around where you've slip stitched it on, and it does give the hat a little bit more stretch too, but it's not necessary, so don't panic if you are having trouble with that slip stitching technique. Now, just so I don't want to finish my project and have a whole lot of sewing in to do, I'm just going to sew in my yarn tail from attaching the hat top to the sides, and I just do that by weaving it in and out of the stitches and trimming off the excess. Now we're just going to add one round onto the hat side. So by joining your yarn with a slip stitch onto one of the panel joins is probably the best way of putting it. So where your two motifs join together, it's best to join it there. Again, I'm going to be working over my yarn tail so I don't have as much sewing in to do. Chain 2 to start with, and now I'm going to half double crochet all the way around the base, tucking in that yarn tail as I go. And you want to make sure that you're getting every stitch in as you're going around. So that should be 20 stitches per panel as you're working around. It ends up being 100 stitches all the way around. So you half double crochet into every one of the border stitches. And I'm counting as I go to make sure that I have got 20 stitches per panel. Then joining at the very end to the very top of the chain stitches that I created with a slip stitch. So see how that sort of softened the scalloping edges of the flower motif. That works really well. So we're ready to start our brim, and that's an easy job, the brim, so we're really close, we're nearly there. As we worked before, just in the very back loop to fold the sides over, this time we're going to be working in the very front loop only, and that is to make the brim fold back the other way. So I've created 2 chains to start off with. So the pattern for the first round of our brim is to create 9 half double crochet stitches and then increase, but just using these front loops. So yarn over into that front loop only, yarn over and through all 3 loops on your hook. Now you want to create 9 of these half double crochets. And then in the next stitch space, or in the 10th space, you want to increase it. So you want to create 2 half double crochet stitches in that stitch. So you can see how well that's already starting to fold over for the brim. It's a really good, simple technique. It works really well. So by creating 11 stitches where we had 10 before, we're going to start to increase that brim At the end of this round you will have 110 stitches. So again, repeating this pattern 10 times around. If you've got any good suggestions for upcoming craft tutorials, please drop me a line in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Slip stitch to join at the end of that round. And now's a good opportunity to sew in any little loose yarn tails that you might have and just trim up any excess tails that might be sticking out of your work. Now if you have a look at the boys' hats here, you can see that the edges are quite jagged. I've got a little trick that will help ours turn out to be a bit of a softer, rounder finish when we get to that part. For this round you'll be working 10 half double crochet stitches, then increasing in that next stitch, creating 2 half double crochets. So you're going to be repeating this pattern around of 10 half double crochets increase 10 times around, which will give you 120 stitches. Join to the beginning of your round with a slip stitch, chain 2, and now you'll be working 11 half double crochets, then increasing. Don't forget your 2 chain stitches always count as your first stitch in this particular project. For the 4th round in the brim, you'll be working 12 half double crochets and then increasing. Repeating that pattern 10 times around, which will give you 140 stitches. Slip stitch to join. And now we're going to work on our 5th round of the brim. Now if you just have a look at how that's going, you can see how we get these flat, I said jagged before, but they're sort of like a flat edges from where you've increased around your brim. And we want to try and avoid that, or at least soften the effect of that. So to do that, what we're going to do is increase halfway around our normal pattern of increasing. So for this particular round, we're going to work 6 half double crochets, then increase 2 stitches into that same spot, and then we'll continue by creating 13 half double crochets and then increase. Now you'll repeat that pattern of 13 half double crochets, then 2 half double crochets in the same stitch space till you have 6 stitches remaining, and you just half double crochet those to the very end of that round. Join at the end of that round. We're nearly there. Lucky last round coming up, and that will be to simply single crochet into each stitch around the edge of the brim. No increasing needed. This is just a stitch that's going to help it sort of stay in shape. So inserting the hook, bringing the yarn through, yarn over and through the loops on your hook for each stitch. So single crochet around, slip stitch to the beginning of that round when you get to the end. can trim your yarn. I was really close to the end of my ball of yarn. I'm using a ball of yarn that I'd already started with, so if you're going to use the Knit Picks Dishy yarn, you will only need one skein of each colour. Time just to stitch that edge so it's nice and neat, and hide the yarn tail by weaving it in and out of our stitches, and then trimming the excess. Now the beauty is, because we hid most of our tails as we worked and trimmed our yarn tails in as we went along, it meant that when we finished that brim and have sewn this last tail in, it's ready to go. Tick, tick, and tick. Now whether you are a huge fan of half-alive like I am or not, you are going to absolutely love these hats. Hey there, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and feel inspired to make your own half-alive flower hat. Please show your support by hitting that like button and consider subscribing to my channel for instant access to fun and creative project tutorials. I would love you to join me on this journey. Thanks again, be safe, positive, and as always, stay awesome. I love you, half-alive.